They said it was impossible. A 130-pound female soldier breaking the leg of a 220-pound male fighter in front of 500 witnesses. But what happened on that training ground would do more than break bones. It would break barriers, shatter careers, and reshape military policy forever. This is the story of how 10 seconds of violence sparked 15 years of change. The early morning sun stretched shadows across the military training grounds as Maya Chen tightened her combat boots for the third time. At 22, she was among only 15 women in a sea of 500 soldiers gathered for the annual inter-unit combat demonstration at Fort Liberty. Her dark hair was secured in a regulation bun, her brown eyes burning with the determination that had sustained her through 2 years of military service in an overwhelmingly male environment. The crowd of soldiers formed a massive circle around the sparring area, their voices creating a low rumble of anticipation. This was far more than a training exercise. It was an opportunity for different units to prove their worth and claim bragging rights for an entire year. Maya's unit, the 3rd Infantry Battalion, had spent months preparing, with their commander carefully selecting the best fighters from their ranks. "Chen!" The voice sliced through the morning air. Maya turned to see Captain Rodriguez approaching, his weathered face set in its characteristic stern expression. At 45, Rodriguez was a veteran of 3 tours in Afghanistan and 1 in Iraq. The scars mapping his face told stories he rarely shared. "Yes, sir," Maya responded, straightening her posture. "You're still on the roster. Last chance to back out." His tone wasn't unkind, merely practical. "Not a chance, sir. I've earned my spot." Rodriguez nodded slightly, the corner of his mouth twitching in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "That you have. Just remember what we discussed. Some of these fighters won't play fair when facing a woman. Be ready for anything." As he walked away, Maya returned to her warm-up routine, methodically stretching each muscle group. She had earned her position through countless hours of training, lightning-fast reflexes, and an ability to outmaneuver opponents twice her size. Her techniques weren't about matching strength with strength, but about leveraging momentum, precision, and timing. Across the circle, she spotted Marcus Bennett from the 7th Armored Division. At 6'2" and weighing over 220 pounds, he was notorious throughout the base for his aggressive fighting style and even louder mouth. Bennett had a reputation for being particularly harsh on female soldiers, frequently making comments about how women didn't belong in combat roles. Bennett was warming up, surrounded by admirers from his unit. His movements were powerful, each punch and kick executed with brutal efficiency. He caught Maya looking and smirked, whispering something to his companions that caused them to laugh and glance in her direction. Maya ignored them, focusing instead on her breathing. She had faced prejudice before and had always let her performance speak for itself. But what she didn't know was that this day would change everything, for better and for worse. Before we continue, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. All right, let's dive back in. Sergeant Major Frank Old School Donovan approached, watching her warm up with an appraising eye. At 62, Donovan was a legend on the base, a veteran of Operation Desert Storm and Operation Just Cause in Panama. He had also participated in classified missions during the Cold War, though he rarely spoke of those days. What made Donovan unique was his unwavering support for capable soldiers, regardless of gender, race, or background. "Your form has improved," he said simply, his voice gravelly from years of shouting orders and breathing desert dust. "Thank you, Sergeant Major. I've been working on the counter techniques you showed me." Donovan nodded, his eyes drifting toward Bennett and his group. "I saw the brackets. If you both keep winning, you'll face him in the finals." Maya followed his gaze. "I know. He's strong but predictable. Relies too much on intimidation and raw power. Donovan's eyes narrowed. And he's got something to prove today. Word is Colonel Harrison from Pentagon Special Programs is watching. Bennett thinks a good showing here might get him into that classified project they're recruiting for. This was news to Maya. The presence of a high-ranking Pentagon official changed the stakes significantly. No wonder Bennett seems especially keyed up, she observed. Anything I should know about this Colonel Harrison? She asked. Donovan's weathered face softened slightly. Harrison served with your father in Desert Storm. They were in the same unit. The mention of her father sent a familiar pang through Maya's chest. Captain William Chen had been a decorated soldier, killed in action in Afghanistan when Maya was 16. His memory was what had driven her to enlist, despite her mother's objections. Does Harrison know I'm competing? If he's seen the roster. Your father was his platoon leader back in the day. Saved his life from what I heard. Before Maya could ask more questions, everything was about to change. The referee, Sergeant Williams, stepped into the center of the circle. His voice boomed across the training ground as he explained the rules. This is controlled combat training. No weapons, no intentional serious injury. When I say stop, you stop immediately. Understood? A chorus of, "Yes, Sergeant," echoed from the gathered soldiers. Maya stretched her arms and rolled her shoulders, feeling the familiar pre-fight nervousness mixed with excitement. She had faced bigger opponents before, but never with so much at stake. The weight of representing not just her unit, but all the women in the military, settled on her shoulders. The first few matches began, with soldiers from different units facing off against each other. Maya watched carefully, studying fighting styles and noting the techniques that seemed most effective. She paid particular attention to how the larger fighters moved, looking for patterns she could exploit. As the morning progressed, the crowd grew more animated. Cheers erupted with each successful takedown, and friendly trash talk flew between the different units. The atmosphere was electric, filled with competitive energy that made these events so popular among the troops. Then something unexpected happened. Maya noticed a small group of officers arriving at the edge of the training ground. Among them was a tall, distinguished-looking man with silver hair and the insignia of a full colonel. Even from a distance, she could see the respect he commanded as other officers straightened in his presence. "That's Harrison," Donovan murmured, appearing at her side. "And look who's with him." Beside Colonel Harrison stood Colonel Mitchell, Bennett's commanding officer. The two men were deep in conversation, with Mitchell gesturing occasionally toward the fighting area. It didn't take much imagination to guess who they were discussing. "Mitchell's been pushing Bennett for that special assignment," Donovan continued. "Rumor has it the program involves some kind of black ops targeting terrorist cells in Africa. Very hush-hush, very prestigious." Maya nodded, processing this information. It explained Bennett's determination to shine today, and his likely fury at the possibility of losing to a woman with so much on the line. What Maya didn't realize was that Bennett would soon cross a line no one could have anticipated. When Maya's name was called for her first match, a hush fell over part of the crowd. She walked confidently to the center of the circle, her heart pounding but her expression calm. Her opponent was from the 5th Engineering Corps, a skilled fighter, but someone she had sparred with before during joint training exercises. The match lasted 3 minutes, with Maya using her speed and agility to avoid his powerful strikes while landing quick, precise hits of her own. When the referee called time, Maya had clearly won, and her unit erupted in cheers. As she walked back to her spot in the circle, she caught Bennett staring at her with obvious disdain. He was scheduled to fight next, and she could see him flexing his muscles and cracking his knuckles in an exaggerated display of intimidation. Bennett's opponent was a smaller soldier from the medical corps who clearly didn't want to be there. The fight was over quickly, with Bennett using unnecessarily rough tactics to pin his opponent. As he stood up, He looked directly at Maya and shouted loud enough for everyone to hear. "That's how real soldiers fight, not like some people who get lucky." The comment was clearly directed at her, and Maya felt her jaw tighten. Several soldiers from her unit moved closer, sensing the tension, but Maya remained calm. Reacting emotionally would only prove whatever point he was trying to make. Captain Rodriguez approached her during the break between matches. "Don't let him get in your head, Chen. That's exactly what he wants." "I know, sir, I'm fine." Rodriguez lowered his voice. "There's something else you should know. I overheard Mitchell talking to some of his officers. They've put money on Bennett winning this whole thing, a lot of money." Maya raised an eyebrow. "Is that allowed?" "Not officially, no. But it happens. Just be careful. There's more riding on this than just bragging rights." As Rodriguez walked away, Maya felt the weight of his words. But she had no idea just how dangerous this competition was about to become. The matches continued throughout the morning, with Maya winning 2 more fights and Bennett dominating his opponents with increasingly aggressive tactics. Each time he won, he made sure to look in Maya's direction, his message clear even without words. By lunchtime, both Maya and Bennett had advanced to the final rounds. The crowd had grown even larger as word spread about the impressive fighters from both units. Officers from various commands had gathered to watch, including Colonel Harrison and his entourage. During the lunch break, Maya sat with her unit trying to eat despite her nervous stomach. Sergeant Elena Rodriguez, no relation to the captain but equally supportive, sat down beside her. "You're doing great out there, Chen. I've never seen someone move like that in combat training." "Thanks, Sergeant. I just hope I can keep it up this afternoon." Rodriguez leaned closer and lowered her voice. "Listen, if you end up facing Bennett, be careful. I've heard things about him. He doesn't like losing, especially to women. Don't let him get in your head." Maya nodded, appreciating the warning but feeling confident in her abilities. She had faced prejudice before and had always let her performance speak for itself. As she was finishing her meal, a shadow fell across the table. Looking up, Maya found herself face to face with Colonel Harrison. The conversations around her immediately hushed. "Private Chen," Harrison said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone used to being obeyed. "I served with your father in Desert Storm. He was a fine soldier and an even better man." Maya stood quickly. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot." Harrison studied her face for a moment. "You have his eyes, and from what I've seen today, his fighting spirit as well." He glanced around at the other soldiers before continuing. "I wanted to wish you luck. Your father would be proud to see you out there." With that, he nodded and walked away, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. The interaction had been brief but powerful, and Maya felt a renewed sense of purpose. If Colonel Harrison was watching, she would make sure to give him a performance worthy of her father's legacy. But she couldn't have known that within hours, she would face the most dangerous moment of her military career. As the afternoon session began, the energy was even more intense than the morning. The final matches would determine the top fighters from each unit, and the competition was fierce. Maya continued to advance through the rounds, her confidence growing with each victory. Bennett was also winning his matches, but Maya noticed that his tactics were becoming more aggressive and less controlled. In his most recent fight, he had continued attacking even after the referee had called for a break, earning him a warning. It became clear that Maya and Bennett were on a collision course. If they both won their next matches, they would face each other in what would essentially be the championship fight. The thought both excited and worried Maya. She knew she was skilled enough to compete with anyone, but Bennett's size advantage and his obvious animosity toward her created a dangerous combination. The crowd seemed to sense what was coming. Conversations became more animated, and she could hear soldiers from different units placing informal bets on potential matchups. The tension was building towards something that would be remembered on this base for years to come. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the training ground as Maya prepared for her semi-final match. Her opponent was Rodriguez from the 2nd Artillery Unit, a solid fighter with good technique but lacking the raw power of some of the other competitors. Maya knew this would be her last fight before potentially facing Bennett in the finals. The match began with both fighters circling each other cautiously. Rodriguez had clearly studied Maya's earlier fights and was trying to neutralize her speed advantage by cutting off the ring and forcing close-quarters combat. But Maya had faced this strategy before and adapted quickly, using quick footwork to stay at optimal distance, landing sharp strikes to Rodriguez's body while avoiding his attempts to grapple. The crowd appreciated the technical skill on display, with both units cheering for their representatives. Midway through the 3-minute round, Maya saw her opening. Rodriguez overextended on a punch, and she slipped to the side while simultaneously sweeping his leg. He went down hard, and before he could recover, Maya had secured a submission hold that forced him to tap out. The referee raised Maya's hand, and her unit exploded in celebration. She had made it to the finals, becoming the first woman in the base's history to advance that far in the annual combat demonstration. But her greatest challenge and greatest danger was still ahead. As she walked back to her corner, Maya noticed that the crowd had grown even larger. Word had spread throughout the base about her performance, and soldiers were abandoning their afternoon duties to witness what everyone was calling a historic moment. On the other side of the circle, Bennett was facing his own semi-final opponent, a tough fighter from the 4th Infantry who had looked impressive all day. But Maya could see immediately that Bennett was on a different level of intensity than he had been in his earlier matches. The fight was brutal from the start. Bennett attacked with vicious combinations, showing no mercy despite the fact that this was supposed to be controlled training. His opponent tried to defend, but Bennett's size and aggression were overwhelming. Within 90 seconds, Bennett had pinned his opponent and was continuing to throw punches even though the fight was clearly over. The referee had to physically pull him off, and Bennett stood up with a wild look in his eyes that made several soldiers step back. As the referee raised Bennett's hand, he pointed directly at Maya and shouted, "You're next, little girl! Time to show everyone what real fighting looks like!" The crowd erupted in a mixture of cheers and shocked murmurs. This had gone beyond friendly competition into something more personal and dangerous. Maya felt her pulse quicken, but she kept her expression neutral. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her intimidated. During the break before the final match, Maya found herself surrounded by her unit and several other soldiers who had come to offer support. The attention was overwhelming, but she tried to focus on preparing mentally for what was coming. "Chen!" called a voice behind her. She turned to see Colonel Harrison approaching with several other high-ranking officers. "I wanted to personally tell you how impressed we are with your performance today. Regardless of what happens in this final match, you have already made history." "Thank you, sir. I'm just doing my job and representing my unit to the best of my ability." "That's exactly the kind of attitude we want to see. Now, I want you to know that we'll be watching this match very carefully. If Bennett steps out of line, we'll intervene immediately." Maya appreciated the gesture, but she also knew that too much intervention from the officers would undermine her achievement. If she won, she wanted it to be clear that she had done it on her own merits. What no one knew was that Bennett was about to make a decision that would end his career and change Maya's life forever. Sergeant Major Donovan approached as Harrison walked away. "One last piece of advice," he said quietly. "Bennett's getting desperate. He knows what's at stake with Colonel Harrison watching. He'll try to overwhelm you in the first 30 seconds. Weather that storm and his stamina will fade. That's when you take him." Maya nodded, grateful for the tactical insight. Donovan had been watching Bennett all day and understood his fighting style better than most. As the time for the final match approached, Maya could feel the energy of the crowd reaching a fever pitch. Soldiers were packed 3 deep around the fighting circle, and she could see camera phones being raised to record what was about to happen. Bennett was in his corner, pacing like a caged animal and periodically glaring in her direction. His unit was pumping him up with loud chants and aggressive rhetoric. Maya heard fragments of their conversation that made it clear they saw this as more than just a fighting competition. Time to put women back in their place. Show her what real strength looks like. Make her quit! Maya's own unit formed a protective circle around her, offering quiet words of encouragement and tactical advice. Sergeant Rodriguez pulled her aside for final instructions. Listen to me carefully, Chen. Bennett is bigger and stronger, but he's also angry and unfocused. Use that against him. Stay calm, stick to your game plan, and don't let him draw you into a brawling match. Your speed and technique are your advantages. I understand, Sergeant. And Chen, don't try to prove anything to anyone except yourself. You've already earned everyone's respect just by getting here. The referee called both fighters to the center of the circle. As Maya walked forward, she could hear the crowd quieting in anticipation. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. Bennett was already at the center line, bouncing on his feet and cracking his knuckles. Up close, his size advantage was even more intimidating. He had at least 6 inches and 60 pounds on her, and his arms looked like tree trunks. Last chance to quit, sweetheart, he said quietly, just loud enough for her to hear. I don't want to hurt you too bad in front of all these people. Maya looked up at him with steady eyes. I appreciate your concern, but I'll be fine. In moments, the fight of her life would begin, but neither of them knew it would end with broken bones and shattered careers. The referee stepped between them and began his final instructions. This is a 3-minute round. Same rules as before. I want a clean fight, and when I say stop, you stop immediately. Touch gloves and back to your corners. Bennett extended his gloves, but when Maya reached out to touch them, he suddenly pulled back with a mocking smile. Oops, changed my mind. The crowd erupted in boos at the unsportsmanlike behavior, but Maya just smiled and returned to her corner. If anything, Bennett's childish antics were making her more confident. Truly skilled fighters didn't need to resort to mind games. The referee looked at his watch and raised his hand. Fighters ready? Both Maya and Bennett nodded. The crowd held its collective breath. Fight! The moment Maya had been preparing for all day had finally arrived. 500 soldiers watched as she stepped forward to face an opponent who clearly saw her as nothing more than a symbol to be destroyed. But Maya Chen had never backed down from a challenge in her life, and she wasn't about to start now. Bennett charged forward immediately, just as Donovan had predicted, throwing heavy punches designed to end the fight quickly. Maya used her footwork to stay just out of range, letting his powerful strikes miss by inches. The crowd was electric, with different units chanting for their representatives. Chen! Chen! Echoed from one side, while Bennett! Bennett! Thundered from the other. The noise was deafening, creating an atmosphere unlike anything the base had ever experienced. Maya quickly realized that Bennett was even stronger than she had anticipated, but she also noticed that his anger was making him sloppy. He was telegraphing his punches and leaving himself open for counterattacks. She began to implement her strategy, using quick jabs to score points while staying mobile. Bennett grew frustrated as his early attempts to overpower Maya failed. Stand still and fight! He growled, lunging forward with a wild haymaker that Maya easily avoided. Fighting smart is still fighting, Maya replied calmly, landing a sharp combination to his ribs before dancing away. The exchange drew cheers from the crowd and clearly irritated Bennett even more. Maya could see his face reddening with anger and exertion. His movements were becoming more predictable as his emotions took over. 1 minute into the fight, Maya had established a clear pattern. She would dart in with quick strikes, land her shots, and escape before Bennett could retaliate. Her superior conditioning was already showing as Bennett was breathing harder while she remained composed. But Bennett was learning too, and he was about to do something that would change everything. But Bennett was adapting. He began cutting off the ring more effectively, using his longer reach to limit Maya's movement options. When he managed to corner her briefly, his heavy shots reminded everyone why he had dominated his previous opponents. "Come on, Bennett!" shouted someone from his unit. "Stop playing with her!" The comment seemed to trigger something in Bennett. His attacks became more vicious, with less regard for the controlled nature of the exercise. Maya noticed the change immediately and adjusted her defense accordingly. 2 minutes into the fight, the tide began to turn more clearly in Maya's favor. Bennett's aggressive early pace was taking its toll, while Maya's careful energy management kept her fresh. She increased her output, landing cleaner shots and making Bennett miss more frequently. The crowd sensed the momentum shift. Maya's supporters grew louder while Bennett's corner became more desperate in their encouragement. "Finish her, Bennett! Don't let a girl beat you!" The pressure seemed to affect Bennett's judgment. With 30 seconds left in the round, he attempted a massive overhand punch that would have ended the fight if it had connected. But Maya saw it coming from a mile away and stepped aside, causing Bennett to stumble forward off balance. In that moment of vulnerability, Maya saw her opportunity. She moved in quickly and executed a perfect takedown, using Bennett's own momentum against him. The crowd exploded as the much larger fighter hit the ground with Maya on top, attempting to secure a submission hold. Bennett's pride wouldn't allow him to tap out, especially not to a woman in front of 500 soldiers. He used his raw strength to power out of Maya's submission attempt and get back to his feet. But the damage to his confidence was visible. The round ended with Maya clearly ahead on points. She returned to her corner to a hero's welcome from her unit, while Bennett's corner was noticeably quieter. His face was flushed with embarrassment as much as exertion. During the brief rest period, Sergeant Rodriguez gave Maya quick instructions. "You're winning this fight, but don't get overconfident. He's going to come out desperate in the next round, which makes him dangerous. And desperate men do dangerous things." Across the circle, Maya could see Bennett's unit talking to him animatedly. His body language suggested they were putting enormous pressure on him not to lose to a woman. The weight of their expectations was clearly affecting him. The referee called both fighters back to the center. Bennett looked different now, less cocky, more desperate. Maya could see the doubt creeping into his eyes, but she also knew that desperate opponents were often the most dangerous. "Round 2! Fighters ready?" As they prepared to continue, Maya noticed that the crowd had grown even larger. Soldiers were standing on equipment and vehicles to get a better view, and she could see officers from throughout the base who had come to witness this unprecedented moment. The second round began with Bennett taking a more measured approach. The early aggression was replaced by calculated attacks as he tried to use his size advantage more effectively. But Maya had found her rhythm now, and her confidence was sky high. She began to take more risks, knowing that she was ahead on points. Her strikes became more precise and powerful, and she started to hurt Bennett with shots to the body that visibly affected his breathing. Halfway through the second round, Maya attempted her most ambitious move yet. As Bennett threw a straight punch, she ducked under it and went for a single-leg takedown. For a moment, it looked like she might succeed in bringing down the much larger opponent again. But Bennett sprawled effectively and managed to maintain his balance. As Maya disengaged and reset her position, she noticed something in Bennett's eyes that hadn't been there before. A cold, calculating anger that was different from his earlier emotional outbursts. "You think you're better than me?" he said quietly, his voice carrying a menacing tone that made several nearby soldiers lean in to hear. "I think I'm winning this fight," Maya replied, staying focused on the competition. "We'll see about that," Bennett responded, and Maya noticed his stance shifting slightly. Something about his positioning didn't look right for standard sparring techniques. In seconds, everything would change. The crowd continued to cheer, unaware of the subtle change in Bennett's demeanor. Maya's instincts told her that something was different. but she couldn't quite identify what. The fight was going her way, but she had the growing feeling that Bennett was planning something outside the rules of engagement. With 1 minute left in the round, Maya decided to press her advantage. She increased her pace, landing several clean shots that staggered Bennett and drew huge cheers from the crowd. Victory seemed within her grasp, but as she moved in for what she hoped would be a finishing combination, Maya saw Bennett's leg begin to move in a way that had nothing to do with legitimate fighting techniques. His knee was rising toward her midsection, but the angle was all wrong for a legal strike. In that split second, Maya realized that Bennett wasn't going for a knee strike. He was attempting to kick her, which was completely against the rules and potentially dangerous. Time seemed to slow down as she recognized the threat and began to react. Bennett's kick came faster than Maya had anticipated, aimed directly at her stomach with enough force to cause serious injury. The crowd gasped as they realized what was happening. This was no longer a controlled sparring match, but something much more dangerous. Maya's training kicked in immediately. Years of martial arts practice had taught her to react instinctively to unexpected attacks. As Bennett's leg extended toward her, she managed to twist her body just enough to avoid the full impact, though his foot still grazed her side. The referee immediately stepped forward, shouting, "Stop! Stop!" But Bennett seemed lost in his rage. Instead of backing down, he attempted a second kick, this one aimed at Maya's legs in what appeared to be an attempt to sweep her feet. But Maya was ready now. The first kick had given her time to analyze Bennett's balance and positioning. As his second kick came toward her, she made a split-second decision that would change everything. What happened next would be talked about on this base for decades. Using a technique she had learned in advanced combat training, Maya caught Bennett's kicking leg at the perfect moment. His full weight was balanced on his standing leg, leaving him completely vulnerable. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the much smaller woman suddenly had complete control over her larger opponent. "You made a big mistake," Maya said calmly, looking directly into Bennett's shocked eyes. What happened next took less than 3 seconds, but would be talked about on the base for decades. Maya twisted Bennett's captured leg while simultaneously sweeping his standing leg with her own foot. The combination of forces created a leverage situation that human bones simply weren't designed to withstand. The sound of Bennett's leg breaking was clearly audible even over the noise of the crowd. It was a sharp crack, followed immediately by Bennett's scream of pain as he crashed to the ground. Maya released his leg immediately and stepped back, her face showing concern rather than triumph. The crowd erupted in chaos. Some soldiers cheered, others gasped in shock, and many simply stood frozen in disbelief at what they had just witnessed. The referee rushed to Bennett's side while medical personnel who had been standing by began pushing through the crowd. Bennett lay on the ground, clutching his leg, his face contorted in agony. The same leg he had tried to use as a weapon against Maya was now clearly broken, with his foot pointing in an unnatural direction. His earlier bravado had completely evaporated, replaced by genuine fear and pain. "Medic! We need a medic!" shouted the referee, though the medical team was already on their way. Maya stood over her fallen opponent, her chest rising and falling as adrenaline coursed through her system. She felt no satisfaction in Bennett's injury. She had simply reacted to protect herself when he had escalated beyond the rules of engagement. "Chen! Chen! Chen!" The chant began with her unit but quickly spread throughout the crowd. 500 soldiers had just witnessed something unprecedented, a skilled fighter defending herself against an illegal attack and coming out victorious. But the aftermath of this moment would prove even more complex than the incident itself. Colonel Harrison pushed through the crowd with several other high-ranking officers. His face was serious as he assessed the situation, but Maya could see something that might have been approval in his eyes. "Chen, are you injured?" he asked as he reached her. "No, sir. I'm fine. He tried to kick me twice, and I defended myself." "I saw it. You did exactly what you were trained to do." The colonel turned to address the crowd. What you all witnessed here today was a textbook example of defensive tactics. When Soldier Bennett violated the rules of engagement, Soldier Chen protected herself using appropriate force. The medical team had arrived and was working on Bennett, preparing to transport him to the base hospital. His leg was obviously broken and would likely require surgery to repair properly. His fighting days were over for the foreseeable future. As Bennett was loaded onto a stretcher, he looked up at Maya with a mixture of pain and humiliation. "This isn't over," he managed to say through gritted teeth. "Yes, it is," Colonel Harrison replied firmly. "Bennett, you'll be facing disciplinary action for attempting to assault a fellow soldier during a training exercise. Chen acted in self-defense." The crowd began to disperse, but the energy remained electric. Soldiers from every unit came up to congratulate Maya, many of them expressing amazement at what they had just seen. The story was already being embellished and would only grow in the telling. Maya's own unit surrounded her with celebrations, but she remained focused on the reality of what had happened. She had seriously injured another soldier, even if it was in self-defense. The weight of that responsibility sat heavily on her shoulders. Sergeant Rodriguez approached with a serious expression. "Chen, you need to understand what just happened here. You didn't just win a fight. You made a statement that will be heard throughout the entire military." "I was just defending myself, Sergeant. He tried to hurt me, and I reacted." "I know that, and everyone who saw it knows that. But the symbolism goes beyond just this one incident. You've shown that skill and training can overcome size and aggression." That's a lesson a lot of people needed to learn. As the immediate chaos died down, Maya found herself being approached by soldiers she had never met before. Women from various units thanked her for standing up for herself, while many male soldiers expressed respect for her skill and composure under pressure. But Maya's ordeal was far from over. It was only beginning. "Chen!" called Lieutenant Colonel Davis, the officer in charge of training operations. "I need you to come with me for debriefing. This incident will need to be thoroughly documented." Maya nodded and followed the officer, knowing that the administrative side of what had just happened was only beginning. There would be reports to file, statements to give, and likely an investigation into the entire incident. As they walked toward the administrative building, Maya could hear the crowd behind them still buzzing with excitement and discussion. The annual combat demonstration had certainly ended in a way no one had expected. "Chen," Lieutenant Colonel Davis said as they walked, "I want you to know that from what I observed, you handled yourself perfectly. Bennett's actions were completely inappropriate, and your response was measured and defensive." "Thank you, sir. I hope he'll be okay. His leg will heal, though it may take months. His pride and his reputation will take much longer to recover, if they ever do." Maya looked back toward the training ground where the incident had occurred. In the space of a few seconds, everything had changed. She had come to the demonstration hoping to represent her unit well and prove herself as a capable soldier. She never could have imagined that she would end up breaking another soldier's leg in front of 500 witnesses. But as she reflected on the events, Maya felt confident that she had done the right thing. Bennett had chosen to escalate the situation beyond acceptable limits, and she had responded appropriately to protect herself. The consequences were his responsibility, not hers. The real test would come in the days and weeks ahead as the story spread throughout the military and beyond. Maya Chen had certainly made her mark, but now she would have to live with the aftermath of becoming the soldier who broke Marcus Bennett's leg in front of 500 witnesses, and her life would never be the same again. The debriefing room was stark and formal, with fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows as Maya sat across from Lieutenant Colonel Davis and two other investigating officers. A recording device sat in the center of the table, documenting every word of what would become the official record of the incident. "State your name and rank for the record," Lieutenant Colonel Davis began. "Private First Class Maya Chen, 3rd Infantry Battalion. Please describe in your own words the events that led to Soldier Bennett's injury." Maya took a deep breath and recounted the entire sequence of events. from the normal sparring match to Bennett's illegal kicks and her defensive response. She spoke clearly and factually, avoiding any emotional language or speculation about Bennett's motives. At what point did you realize that Soldier Bennett was no longer following the rules of engagement? Asked Major Williams, one of the investigating officers. When I saw his first kick coming toward my stomach, the angle and force were completely different from any legal technique. I knew immediately that he was trying to hurt me outside the bounds of the training exercise. And your response? I defended myself using the techniques I was trained to use. When he attempted a second kick, I neutralized the threat by controlling his leg and taking him down. The injury was an unfortunate consequence of his own actions. The questions continued for over an hour, with the officers examining every detail of the incident from multiple angles. Maya answered consistently and honestly, never wavering from her account of what had happened. During a brief break in the questioning, Maya's mind wandered to what was happening elsewhere on the base. She knew that word of the incident had spread quickly, and she wondered how the story was being told and retold by soldiers who hadn't been there to see it themselves. "Private Chen," Lieutenant Colonel Davis said as they resumed, "I want you to understand that this investigation is not questioning your actions. From all accounts, including video evidence from multiple cell phones, you acted appropriately in self-defense. However, any incident resulting in serious injury requires a thorough review." Maya nodded her understanding. She had expected nothing less and was grateful that the investigation seemed to be proceeding fairly. Meanwhile, in the base hospital, another story was unfolding. Marcus Bennett was coming out of surgery to repair his broken leg. The doctors had been forced to insert metal pins and plates to stabilize the fracture, and he was facing months of rehabilitation before he would be able to walk normally again. As the anesthesia wore off, Bennett's first coherent thought was not about his injury, but about the humiliation he had suffered in front of 500 soldiers. The image of Maya standing over him as he lay broken on the ground played repeatedly in his mind. His unit commander, Captain Mitchell, was waiting by his bedside with a grim expression. "How are you feeling, Parker?" Mitchell asked, his tone carefully neutral. "Like I got hit by a truck," Bennett replied groggily. "We need to talk about what happened out there. The investigation is ongoing, but multiple witnesses have confirmed that you attempted to kick Chen during what was supposed to be a controlled sparring match." Bennett's face hardened. "She was showing off, trying to embarrass me in front of everyone. I just wanted to potentially injure a fellow soldier?" Mitchell interrupted, his voice suddenly stern. "Bennett, you're looking at serious disciplinary action, possibly including court-martial proceedings. Your actions were completely unacceptable." The reality of his situation began to sink in for Bennett. Not only was he physically injured, but his military career was now in jeopardy. The anger and pride that had driven him to attack Maya had cost him everything. Back at the administrative building, the investigation was wrapping up. The officers had reviewed cell phone footage from multiple angles, interviewed witnesses, and thoroughly examined Maya's account of events. The evidence overwhelmingly supported her version of what had happened. "Private Chen," Lieutenant Colonel Davis said finally, "based on our investigation, we find that you acted appropriately in self-defense when attacked by Soldier Bennett. No disciplinary action will be taken against you. In fact, your composure and restraint under difficult circumstances reflect well on your training and character." Maya felt a wave of relief wash over her. While she had been confident in her actions, having official vindication was important for her career and peace of mind. However, the lieutenant colonel continued, "I want to prepare you for what comes next. This incident is going to generate significant attention, both within the military and potentially in the media. You've become a symbol, whether you wanted to or not." And the lieutenant colonel's prediction would prove to be an understatement. As Maya left the administrative building, she was surprised to find a small crowd of soldiers waiting outside. When they saw her emerge, they began to applaud. Among them were women from various units who had come to show their support. "Thank you," said Corporal Jennifer Hayes from the military police unit. "What you did today showed everyone that we can defend ourselves just as well as anyone else." Maya felt uncomfortable with the hero worship, but understood the significance of what had happened. In a male-dominated environment, her victory over Bennett had taken on symbolic meaning, far beyond a simple training exercise. Over the next few hours, Maya found herself approached by soldiers, officers, and even some base civilians who had heard about the incident. Most were supportive, but she also detected some hostility from soldiers who felt she had gone too far in her response to Bennett's attack. That evening, Maya sat in her barracks room trying to process everything that had happened. Her roommate, Private Lisa Santiago, came in with news from around the base. "Maya, you're not going to believe this, but there are already videos of the fight posted online. Someone recorded it on their phone, and it's going viral on social media." Maya groaned. The last thing she wanted was to become an internet sensation. "What are people saying?" "Mostly positive. The comments are full of people praising you for standing up for yourself. But there are also some negative ones from people who think you used excessive force." Maya pulled up the video on her phone and watched herself break Bennett's leg for the first time since it had happened. Seeing it from an outside perspective was jarring. The sequence looked even more dramatic on video than it had felt in the moment. The video had already been shared thousands of times and was accompanied by headlines like "Female Soldier Breaks Attacker's Leg" and "Woman Warrior Defends Herself Against Larger Opponent." Maya realized that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't predict. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother back home, who had somehow already heard about the incident. "Saw the video online. So proud of you for defending yourself. Call me when you can." The speed of the internet meant Maya's story was spreading far beyond Fort Liberty, and the world was watching. The speed at which information traveled in the digital age meant that Maya's story was already spreading far beyond the military base where it had occurred. She was becoming famous for something she had never wanted to be known for. As night fell on the base, Maya reflected on the day's events. She had started the morning as just another soldier participating in a routine training exercise. She was ending the day as the center of a controversy that would likely follow her for the rest of her military career. But despite all the complications and unwanted attention, Maya felt at peace with her actions. She had defended herself when attacked, using appropriate force to neutralize a threat. The consequences were Bennett's responsibility, not hers. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as the story continued to spread and the military bureaucracy processed the incident. But tonight, Maya Chen could sleep knowing that she had proven herself capable of handling whatever was thrown at her, both literally and figuratively. The next morning brought unexpected visitors to the base. Media crews had somehow gotten wind of the story and were gathering outside the main gate, hoping to interview Maya about what was now being called the incident. Base security had orders to keep reporters off the installation, but their presence added another layer of complexity to an already complicated situation. Maya was called to Captain Rodriguez's office first thing in the morning. Her company commander looked tired, as if he had been dealing with phone calls and inquiries all night. "Chen, sit down. We need to discuss how to handle the media attention this is generating." "I never asked for this attention, sir." "I know you didn't, but it's here whether we want it or not. The base public affairs office has been fielding calls from news outlets all night. Some are painting you as a hero. Others are questioning whether your response was appropriate." Maya felt overwhelmed by the scope of what was happening. "What do you recommend, Captain?" "For now, we're not authorizing any interviews. The investigation is ongoing, and we don't want anything you say to be taken out of context. But I want you to be prepared for this to get bigger before it gets smaller." As Maya left the captain's office, she encountered Sergeant Williams, the referee from yesterday's matches. He approached her with a serious expression. "Chen, I need you to know something. I've been refereeing these competitions for 8 years, and I've never seen anything like what Bennett did yesterday. In my official report, I stated clearly that his actions were completely outside the rules and that you had no choice but to defend yourself." "Thank you, Sergeant. That means a lot. There are some people trying to spin this as you being overly aggressive, but anyone who was actually there knows better. You showed remarkable restraint under the circumstances." But not everyone on base saw it that way, and Maya was about to discover just how divided opinion had become. Throughout the morning, Maya noticed a clear divide among the soldiers on base. Many approached her with congratulations and support, particularly the women who saw her as having struck a blow for equality. But others seemed to avoid her or gave her hostile looks, apparently believing she had gone too far in her response. The divide became most apparent in the mess hall at lunch. Maya sat with her usual group from the 3rd Infantry Battalion, but she was acutely aware of the conversations happening at other tables. Some soldiers were loudly discussing the incident, with opinions ranging from admiration to condemnation. "I heard Bennett's leg was shattered in 3 places," someone said at a nearby table. "Good," replied another voice. "He had it coming after what he tried to do to her." "Come on, breaking someone's leg over a training exercise? That's excessive," argued a 3rd soldier. Maya tried to ignore the conversations, but it was impossible to escape the fact that she had become the most talked-about person on the base. Later that afternoon, Maya received word that Marcus Bennett wanted to see her. He was still in the hospital, but was lucid and had specifically requested a meeting. Against her better judgment, Maya agreed to visit him. The hospital room was quiet except for the beeping of monitoring equipment. Bennett lay in bed with his leg elevated and encased in a complex metal frame. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by pain and medication. "Chen," he said when she entered. His voice was lacking its usual aggressive tone. "Bennett, how are you feeling?" "Like my leg got broken by someone half my size," he replied with bitter humor. "I wanted to talk to you before this gets even more out of hand." Maya pulled up a chair, curious about what he had to say. "Look, I screwed up yesterday. I let my pride and my prejudices cloud my judgment, and I paid for it. But I need you to understand something. What happened between us is being turned into something bigger than it was." "What do you mean?" "The media is making this about gender politics and military equality. They're turning you into some kind of feminist icon and me into a villain. I'm not saying I don't deserve criticism for what I did, but this has gone beyond the two of us." Maya was surprised to find herself agreeing with her former opponent. Maya considered his words. She had been thinking the same thing as she watched the story grow beyond her control. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said honestly. "I was just defending myself." "I know that, and I'm not angry at you for it. I put myself in that position by attacking you illegally. But I'm worried about what this is doing to both of our careers." Bennett was right to be concerned. Word had come down that morning that military investigators were reviewing the incident, and there was talk of using it as a case study in training programs. Maya's actions were being held up as an example of proper defensive tactics, while Bennett was becoming a cautionary tale about the consequences of inappropriate aggression. "Bennett, I want you to know that I take no pleasure in your injury. If I could have stopped you without hurting you, I would have. I believe you, and I want you to know that despite everything, I respect what you did. You fought like a warrior when I gave you no choice." It was perhaps the first genuine compliment Bennett had ever given her, and it carried extra weight coming from his hospital bed. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Bennett's parents, who had driven from 3 states away after hearing about their son's injury. They looked shocked at seeing Maya in the room, clearly not expecting to meet the person who had broken their son's leg. Mom, Dad, this is Private Chen, Bennett said awkwardly. His father, a large man who clearly resembled his son, looked at Maya with undisguised hostility. So you're the one who did this to my boy? I defended myself when your son attacked me illegally, Maya replied calmly. Marcus made a mistake, but did you have to break his leg? Couldn't you have just backed away? Harold, Bennett's mother placed a hand on her husband's arm. We discussed this. Marcus told us what really happened. The tension in the room was palpable, and Maya realized this was exactly the kind of confrontation that the base command had been trying to avoid. She stood to leave. I should go. Bennett, I hope your recovery goes well. As she reached the door, Bennett called out to her. Chen, thank you for coming. And for what it's worth, you earned my respect yesterday. Maya nodded and left the room, feeling emotionally drained by the encounter. The conversation had humanized Bennett in a way that made the whole situation more complex. He wasn't just a symbol of military sexism, he was a real person dealing with the consequences of a moment of poor judgment. And Maya was beginning to understand that this story had no simple heroes or villains. Walking back across the base, Maya noticed that the crowd of reporters outside the gate had grown larger. She could see satellite trucks from national news networks, indicating that the story was reaching an even wider audience. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister back home. You're on CNN. Mom is recording everything. We're so proud of you. Maya realized that her 15 minutes of fame were just beginning, and she had no idea how to handle the pressure that came with unwanted celebrity. All she had wanted was to serve her country and prove herself as a capable soldier. Now she was becoming the face of a debate about women in combat roles that extended far beyond one broken leg on a military training ground. That evening, Maya sat in her room trying to ignore the constant buzzing of her phone with messages from friends, family, and complete strangers who had somehow gotten her number. The simple training exercise that had started it all seemed like it had happened in another lifetime. Outside her window, she could see soldiers still gathering in small groups, undoubtedly discussing the incident that had turned their quiet base into the center of a national conversation. The next morning, a formal announcement came down from base command. Due to the unusual circumstances, Maya was being given 3 days of leave to allow the media frenzy to die down. It was a transparent attempt to get her off base until things calmed down, but she was grateful for the opportunity to escape the constant attention. Maya decided to visit her mother, who lived just 3 hours away. The drive gave her time to think, to process everything that had happened. She found herself replaying the moment of Bennett's attack in her mind, wondering if she could have responded differently. But every scenario she imagined ended with either her getting injured or Bennett escaping consequences for his actions. In the end, she kept coming back to the same conclusion. She had done what was necessary, nothing more and nothing less. Her mother was waiting anxiously at the door when Maya pulled into the driveway. Helen Chen was a small woman with the same brown eyes as her daughter, though hers were now shadowed with worry. I've been watching the news, she said as she embraced Maya. Are you okay? I'm fine, Mom. It's all been blown out of proportion. Inside, Helen had prepared Maya's favorite meal, as if good food could somehow protect her daughter from the storm of controversy. As they ate, Maya recounted the full story, including details that hadn't made it into the news reports. Your father would have been proud, Helen said quietly. He always believed in standing your ground. The mention of her father brought tears to Maya's eyes. The mention of her father brought a lump to Maya's throat. William Chen had been a decorated soldier, a man of principle who had taught his daughter to defend herself from an early age. I just wish this would all blow over, Maya said. I didn't ask to become some kind of symbol. I know, honey, but sometimes life chooses our battles for us. The 3 days of leave passed quickly in the comfort of her childhood home. Maya deliberately avoided social media and news coverage, choosing instead to help her mother with projects around the house and reconnect with a few close friends from high school. It was a brief respite from the chaos that awaited her back at the base. When Maya returned to Fort Liberty, she found that things had both changed and stayed the same. The media presence had diminished somewhat, though a few persistent reporters still lingered at the main gate. On base, she was still the subject of whispers and stares, but the intensity had faded a bit. Captain Rodriguez called her into his office as soon as she reported back for duty. "How was your leave, Chen?" "Restful, sir. Thank you for arranging it." "Good. Now, there have been some developments while you were gone. The Pentagon has taken an interest in your case." Maya felt a flutter of anxiety. "What kind of interest?" "Colonel Harrison, who was here for the demonstration, has recommended you for advanced combat training. He was impressed with your performance and believes you have potential for special operations." This was unexpected news. Special operations were the elite of the elite, and women had only recently been allowed to attempt qualification for such roles. I don't know what to say, sir. You don't have to decide right away, but I want you to know that this incident, as unfortunate as it was, has opened some doors for you. Later that day, Maya received another piece of news. Marcus Bennett had been officially discharged from the hospital and was being transferred to a rehabilitation facility. He would be facing a disciplinary hearing once he was physically able, but the consensus was that his military career was effectively over. Maya felt a complex mix of emotions about Bennett's situation. On one hand, he had brought this on himself through his actions. On the other, she couldn't help feeling that the punishment seemed severe for what might have been a momentary lapse in judgment. But Sergeant Major Donovan had a different perspective, and his words would change how Maya saw her future. That afternoon, Maya was approached by Sergeant Major Donovan as she was completing her daily PT. "Walk with me, Chen," he said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. As they moved away from the main training area, Donovan spoke quietly. "I've been in the military for 40 years, and I've seen all kinds of soldiers come and go. The ones who make the biggest difference aren't always the strongest or the fastest. They're the ones who keep their heads when everyone else is losing theirs, like you did with Bennett. That wasn't just good fighting, it was good soldiering. You kept your composure under pressure and responded appropriately to a threat. That's the kind of instinct we can't teach." Maya was surprised by the praise. Donovan wasn't known for giving compliments easily. "Thank you, Sergeant Major. I hear Harrison's recommended you for advanced training. You should take it. The military is changing, and it needs soldiers like you to help it change for the better." As Donovan walked away, Maya considered his words. Perhaps there was a purpose to all this unwanted attention after all. Perhaps her experience could open doors for other women who would come after her. That evening, Maya received a call from an unexpected source. Colonel Harrison himself was on the line, wanting to speak with her directly. "Private Chen, I wanted to follow up personally on my recommendation. The selection process for the advanced training program is rigorous, but I believe you have what it takes." "Thank you, sir. I'm still processing everything that's happened. I understand this wasn't the path you expected your career to take, but sometimes the most significant opportunities come from the most challenging circumstances." Harrison paused before continuing. "Your father saved my life in Desert Storm. He never hesitated, never questioned what needed to be done. I see that same clarity of purpose in you." The conversation left Maya with much to think about. The incident with Bennett, which had initially seemed like a potential disaster for her career, was now creating opportunities she had never anticipated. 2 weeks after her return to base, Maya was called to testify at Bennett's disciplinary hearing. The room was small and formal, with a panel of 3 senior officers presiding. Bennett sat at one table with his representative, while a military prosecutor sat at another. Bennett's leg was still in a cast, and he used crutches to move around. Maya recounted her version of events once again, answering questions from both the panel and Bennett's representative. Throughout her testimony, she maintained a professional demeanor, speaking only about the facts without embellishment or emotional language. When it was Bennett's turn to speak, he surprised everyone by taking full responsibility for his actions. "I violated the rules of engagement and attacked Private Chen illegally," he stated clearly. "My behavior was unacceptable and reflected poorly on myself, my unit, and the United States Army. I accept whatever consequences the panel deems appropriate." Bennett's unexpected accountability would prove to be his path toward redemption. As Maya left the hearing room, Bennett caught her eye and gave her a small nod, a gesture of acknowledgement, if not quite forgiveness. She nodded back, understanding passing between them without words. The outcome of the hearing was what most had expected. Bennett received a general discharge under honorable conditions, allowing him to retain his benefits but ending his military career. The panel had taken into account his previous record of service and his willingness to accept responsibility for his actions. As word of the hearing's outcome spread across the base, Maya found herself at a crossroads. The application for Colonel Harrison's advanced training program sat on her desk, awaiting her decision. It represented an opportunity few soldiers, especially women, ever received. But it would also mean leaving behind the familiar routine of her current unit and stepping into an unknown future where she would continue to be scrutinized as the woman who broke Bennett's leg. Sergeant Rodriguez found her sitting alone in the barracks, staring at the application. "Still haven't decided?" Rodriguez asked, sitting down beside her. "I'm not sure if I'm doing this for the right reasons," Maya admitted. "Am I pursuing this because I actually want it, or because I feel like I have to prove something after everything that's happened?" Rodriguez considered this for a moment. "When I first enlisted, my father told me something I've never forgotten. The right path isn't always the easy one, but it's the one you won't regret not taking. Whatever you decide, make sure it's something you won't look back on with regret." That night, Maya made her decision. She completed the application for the advanced training program, committing herself to a new path that had opened unexpectedly before her. Whether it was the right decision, only time would tell. But it was a decision she made for herself, not because of Bennett or the incident or the opinions of others. 3 months later, as Maya prepared to leave for her new assignment, a small package arrived for her. Inside was a handwritten note from Marcus Bennett. "Sometimes it takes getting knocked down to learn how to stand up properly. Good luck with your training. You've earned it." Alongside the note was a small silver compass, a traditional gift among soldiers embarking on new journeys. It was an unexpected gesture of reconciliation from a man who had once been her enemy, and Maya realized that even broken things could sometimes be made whole again. As she packed the compass with her belongings, Maya reflected on the strange path that had brought her here. One moment of violence, one split-second decision, had altered not only her life, but Bennett's as well. Their stories would forever be intertwined, a complex legacy neither of them had sought. The incident that had begun as a simple training exercise had evolved into something that would be studied and discussed throughout the military for years to come. And Maya Chen, who had only wanted to prove herself as a soldier, had become something more, a symbol of change in an institution resistant to it, a reluctant pioneer whose actions spoke louder than any words could have. Tomorrow she would begin her new training, facing new challenges and new prejudices. But she would face them knowing that she had already overcome the most difficult test of all, standing her ground when it mattered most, regardless of the consequences. 6 months after the incident that changed her life, Sergeant Maya Chen stood at attention before a congressional subcommittee on military affairs. Wearing her dress uniform with newly earned sergeant stripes, she faced a room packed with media, military officials, and advocates on both sides of the women in combat debate. The incident that had started as a simple training exercise had evolved into a defining moment in military policy discussions. "Sergeant Chen," said Congresswoman Patricia Williams, the subcommittee chair, "thank you for appearing before us today. Your experience has sparked important conversations about military training protocols and gender integration in combat roles." Maya adjusted the microphone in front of her. "Thank you for having me, ma'am. I'm honored to share my perspective." The months since the incident had been a whirlwind of change for Maya. She had been promoted ahead of schedule, partly due to her exemplary conduct during the controversy. The military had used her case as an example of proper defensive tactics, incorporating video of the incident into training programs worldwide. Marcus Bennett, meanwhile, had been medically discharged from the military after complications with his leg injury prevented him from returning to full duty. He had faced a court-martial for assault on a fellow soldier and received a general discharge under honorable conditions, effectively ending any chance of a military career. "Sergeant Chen," continued Congresswoman Williams, "critics have argued that the military's celebration of your actions sends the wrong message about proportional response. How do you respond to those concerns?" Maya had prepared for this question through months of media training provided by the military. "Ma'am, I would respectfully disagree with that characterization. I didn't celebrate causing injury to a fellow soldier. I defended myself when attacked illegally, using techniques I was trained to use. The injury was an unfortunate consequence of Soldier Bennett's decision to escalate beyond the rules of engagement." Congressman Robert Hayes, known for his opposition to women in combat roles, leaned forward in his chair. "Sergeant Chen, don't you think this incident proves that mixed gender training creates unnecessary complications and tensions?" "No, sir, I don't. This incident was about one individual's poor judgment, not about gender integration. The hundreds of other soldiers present that day, male and female, conducted themselves professionally. Soldier Bennett's actions were an aberration, not a systemic problem." The hearing would last 2 hours, but Maya's composure never wavered. She had learned to stand strong under any pressure. The hearing continued for 2 hours, with Maya fielding questions about military culture, training protocols, and her personal experience. She had become surprisingly comfortable in the spotlight, though she still preferred her role as a soldier to her unexpected position as a public figure. After the hearing, Maya was approached by Dr. Jennifer Adams, a researcher studying women in military roles. "Sergeant Chen, I've been following your story since the beginning. Would you be interested in participating in a long-term study about the experiences of women in combat training? I'd be honored to contribute to research that might help other women in the military." That evening, Maya called Marcus Bennett from his rehabilitation facility, where he was learning to walk with a permanent limp. They had developed an unlikely friendship over the months, bonded by their shared experience of having their lives changed by a single moment. "Marcus, how are you doing?" "Getting better every day. Physical therapy is brutal, but I'm determined to walk normally again. How did the congressional hearing go?" "As well as could be expected. They asked the same questions everyone always asks, about proportional response and gender integration." "Maya, I want you to know something. Watching you handle all this attention and pressure over the past 6 months has taught me more about strength and character than my entire military career did." It was a remarkable evolution for someone who had once tried to attack her. Marcus had used his time in recovery to reflect on his actions and prejudices, eventually becoming an unlikely advocate for treating women in the military with respect and equality. "Marcus, you've changed too. The person you are now is nothing like the person who tried to kick me that day. That person was full of anger and insecurity. Losing my military career was devastating, but it also forced me to confront some ugly truths about myself. Their conversation was interrupted by Maya's phone buzzing with a text from her commander. She had been selected for an advanced leadership course, another indication that her career was thriving, despite, or perhaps because of, the controversy. The next morning, Maya reported to her new assignment as a training instructor for defensive tactics. The military had decided that her experience and demonstrated skills made her ideal for teaching other soldiers how to protect themselves in dangerous situations. Her first class consisted of 20 soldiers, both male and female, who had specifically requested to train with the person who had become famous for her defensive techniques. Maya felt the weight of their expectations, but also the satisfaction of being able to pass on valuable skills. "Today, we're going to practice defensive responses to illegal attacks," she began. "The goal is not to hurt your opponent, but to neutralize threats and protect yourself. Sometimes, unfortunately, injury to an attacker is unavoidable when they choose to escalate beyond acceptable limits." And Maya realized she was no longer just a soldier. She was a teacher, a mentor, and a symbol of change. As she demonstrated techniques, Maya thought about how far she had come from that day 6 months ago, when she was just another soldier hoping to represent her unit well in a training competition. She had never asked to become a symbol or a spokesperson, but she had accepted the responsibility that came with her unexpected prominence. The incident had sparked policy changes throughout the military. Training protocols were updated to include clearer guidelines about appropriate responses to illegal attacks. Video recording of training exercises became mandatory to ensure accurate documentation of any incidents. Most importantly, educational programs about respect and professional conduct were expanded and made mandatory for all personnel. Maya's story had also inspired other women in the military to speak out about harassment and discrimination they had experienced. The conversation that began with one broken leg had evolved into a broader examination of military culture and the treatment of women in uniform. During her lunch break, Maya received an email from a young woman who had just enlisted in the Army. "Sergeant Chen, I wanted to thank you for showing that women can defend themselves and succeed in the military. Your example inspired me to join. I hope someday I can be as strong and confident as you are." It was messages like these that reminded Maya why the attention and controversy had been worthwhile. If her experience could inspire other women to pursue military careers or feel more confident in defending themselves, then the months of media scrutiny and public debate had served a purpose. Colonel Harrison, who had been instrumental in advancing Maya's career following the incident, visited her training session that afternoon. He observed from the back of the room, nodding approvingly as she guided her students through various defensive maneuvers. "You're a natural teacher, Chen," he said after the class had dismissed. "Your students respect you, and that's half the battle." "Thank you, sir. I'm still getting used to being on this side of the training." Harrison's expression grew more serious. "I wanted to talk to you about something else. The Pentagon is forming a special committee to review and update combat training protocols across all branches of the military. I've recommended you for a position as a consultant." Maya was stunned. "Sir, I'm honored, but I'm just a sergeant. Shouldn't that position go to someone with more experience?" "Experience comes in many forms, Chen. You've lived through something that most military theorists only speculate about. Your insights would be invaluable." Later that week, Maya received a surprising invitation. Captain Mitchell, Marcus Bennett's former commanding officer, had requested a meeting. The same man who had once bet heavily on Bennett's victory and pushed him to defeat Maya at any cost now wanted to speak with her privately. What could the man who had helped create the monster possibly have to say? The meeting took place in Mitchell's office, a sparse, utilitarian space that reflected its occupants' no-nonsense personality. "Thank you for coming, Sergeant Chen," Mitchell said formally, gesturing for her to take a seat. "I know there's no reason you should want to talk to me after everything that happened." I'm curious about why you wanted to see me, sir. Mitchell sighed heavily, looking suddenly older than his 50 years. I wanted to apologize. My actions contributed to what happened that day. I pushed Bennett too hard, put too much pressure on him. I created an environment where he felt failure wasn't an option, even if it meant breaking the rules. The admission surprised Maya. She had expected defensiveness, not accountability. May I ask why, sir? Why was it so important that Bennett win? Mitchell was quiet for a moment, weighing his words. I was up for promotion to full colonel. Having a soldier selected for the Special Operations Program would have all but guaranteed it. I let my ambition cloud my judgment, and Bennett paid the price. And what about now, sir? Now I'm facing my own disciplinary review as I should. Leadership isn't just about giving orders, it's about being accountable for the culture you create. As Maya left Mitchell's office, she reflected on how the ripple effects of that single moment continued to expand outward, touching lives in unexpected ways. Bennett's career was over, Mitchell's was in jeopardy, and her own had taken a turn she never could have predicted. Meanwhile, Marcus Bennett was embarking on his own new journey. After completing his physical rehabilitation, he had been approached by a veterans advocacy group that helped former military personnel transition to civilian life. They saw in his story a powerful opportunity to discuss accountability, consequences, and growth. I never thought I'd be giving talks about anger management and respect, he told Maya during one of their regular calls. But every time I tell my story, I see recognition in someone's eyes. My mistake might actually be helping others avoid the same path. That takes courage, Maya replied. Not everyone can face their mistakes so publicly. I learned about courage from watching you. You never backed down, even when it would have been easier. A year after the incident, Maya found herself back at Fort Liberty, this time as a special guest for the annual inter-unit combat demonstration. The event had been significantly restructured following the previous year's controversy, with stronger safety protocols and clearer rules of engagement. And Maya would discover that her legacy had already begun to change the military, one soldier at a time. As she watched the demonstrations from the officers' viewing area, Sergeant Major Donovan, now retired but still respected enough to be welcomed at military functions, joined her. The old warrior observed the proceedings with a critical eye. They've made good changes, he commented. More emphasis on technique and control, less on raw aggression. Your influence at work. I just hope it prevents another incident like mine, Maya replied. That's the thing about legacies, Chen. They're not always what we expect. You came here to be a soldier, not a reformer. But sometimes history has other plans for us. After the demonstrations, a group of female soldiers approached Maya, their faces alight with admiration and respect. Among them was a young private who bore a striking resemblance to Maya herself at that age, determined, fit, and slightly wary. Sergeant Chen, would you mind taking a photo with us? You're the reason many of us enlisted. As they posed for the photograph, Maya caught a glimpse of her reflection in a nearby window. The face that looked back at her was more confident, more weathered, and somehow more at peace than the young woman who had stepped onto the training ground a year ago. Later that day, Maya visited the base hospital, where a physical therapy room had recently been named in Marcus Bennett's honor, a suggestion he had made to recognize the facility that had helped him recover. The plaque on the wall read, Bennett Recovery Center, where setbacks become comebacks. Marcus himself was there for the small dedication ceremony, walking with a pronounced but manageable limp. He had lost the swagger of his military days but had gained something more valuable, humility and perspective. I never thought I'd have a room named after me, he joked when he saw Maya, especially not for breaking my leg. It's not named after how you fell, Maya replied. It's named for how you got back up. The two former adversaries stood side by side, their shared history creating a bond that transcended their initial conflict. In many ways, they represented the changes that were slowly transforming the military. Marcus, with his hard-earned wisdom about respect and accountability, Maya with her unwavering determination to excel on her own terms. That evening, Maya was invited to dinner with Colonel Harrison and several other high-ranking officers involved in the Pentagon's training protocol review. The conversation was focused and professional, but underneath ran a current of genuine respect for her contributions. The new protocols will be implemented across all branches next quarter, Harrison informed her. Your input was invaluable, particularly regarding defensive tactics and appropriate response escalation. I'm glad something positive came from the incident, sir. More than you know, Chen. Applications from women for combat roles are up 28% since last year. Many of them specifically cite your example as inspiration. And Maya understood that her broken leg had paved a path for thousands of women to follow. After dinner, Harrison took Maya aside. I've been meaning to give you something, he said, reaching into his pocket and withdrawing a small, worn metal object, a unit coin from Desert Storm. Your father carried this during our deployment. Before he died in Afghanistan, he asked me to give it to you when the time was right. I think he'd agree that time is now. Maya took the coin, running her thumb over its faded surface. It was a tangible connection to her father, a reminder of the legacy she had inherited and was now building upon in her own way. He always believed women belonged in combat roles, Harrison continued. He'd be proud to see you helping to make that reality. 2 years to the day after the incident, Maya stood before a new group of recruits at the Army's Advanced Combat Training Facility. Now a staff sergeant with multiple commendations, she had become one of the military's most respected instructors in defensive tactics and conflict de-escalation. Combat isn't about who's strongest or most aggressive, she told the attentive faces before her. It's about who's smartest, who's most controlled, and who's best prepared for the unexpected. Today, we're going to learn how to turn an opponent's aggression against them, not out of malice, but out of necessity. As she demonstrated the techniques that had once saved her from serious injury, Maya noticed a young female recruit watching with particular intensity. After class, the recruit approached her hesitantly. Sergeant Chen, I've seen the video of your match with Bennett 100 times. It's what made me want to join the Army. What's your name, Private? Michelle Bennett, ma'am. Maya raised an eyebrow in surprise. Any relation to Marcus Bennett? The young woman nodded. He's my cousin. He talks about you all the time. Says you're the best example of what a soldier should be, regardless of gender. The irony wasn't lost on Maya. Marcus Bennett, once her fiercest opponent, was now sending his own family members to learn from her. Life had a strange way of coming full circle, and Maya realized that redemption wasn't just possible, it was inevitable when people chose to grow. That night, Maya called Marcus to share the unexpected connection. He laughed when she told him about meeting Michelle. I was wondering when she'd work up the courage to introduce herself. She's been talking about training with you since she enlisted. You never mentioned you had a cousin joining up. I wanted her to make her own impression. She's got the same determination I had, but hopefully better judgment. She seems promising. Reminds me a bit of myself at that age. That's what I was hoping for. If she turns out half as capable as you, she'll do fine. The conversation drifted to their own evolving careers. Marcus had become a respected speaker on military culture and was working on a book about his experience and subsequent personal transformation. Maya had received word that she was being considered for officer candidate school, a path that could eventually lead to a commission. We've both come a long way from that training ground, Marcus reflected. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we'd just had a normal match that day, Maya mused. I'd have lost anyway, Marcus admitted with a chuckle. You were the better fighter. I was just too proud to see it. After ending the call, Maya stepped outside her quarters and looked up at the stars. She thought about the strange, unpredictable path her life had taken. One moment of violence, one split-second decision, had altered not just her trajectory, but the policies and culture of an entire institution. The next morning, Maya received notice that she had been selected for a special assignment, developing a comprehensive training program on gender integration in combat units. The program would be implemented across all military branches, potentially affecting thousands of service members. As she reviewed the assignment details, Maya reflected on the legacy she was creating. She had never set out to be a trailblazer or a symbol. She had simply wanted to be a good soldier, to honor her father's memory, and to serve her country with distinction. But sometimes, as Sergeant Major Donovan had observed, history has other plans. Later that week, Maya visited the military academy, where a new generation of officers was being trained. She had been invited to speak about her experience and the lessons she had learned. Looking out at the sea of young faces, both male and female, she felt a profound sense of responsibility. The incident that brought me here today lasted less than 10 seconds, she began. But in those 10 seconds, every decision I had ever made, every skill I had ever practiced, and every value I had ever held came into play. That's what military service is about. Preparing so thoroughly that when those critical moments arrive, you act with instinct and integrity. A hand raised in the audience. Sergeant Chen, do you regret what happened with Bennett? Maya considered the question carefully. I regret that a fellow soldier was injured. I regret that it took such a dramatic incident to spark necessary changes in training protocols. But I don't regret defending myself, and I don't regret the conversations and reforms that followed. Sometimes progress comes at a cost we wish we didn't have to pay. Another hand. Has your perspective on women in combat roles changed since the incident? My perspective hasn't changed, but it has deepened. I've always believed that capability matters more than gender. What's changed is my understanding of the systemic challenges women face in proving that capability. The incident forced many people who might never have questioned their assumptions to reconsider what women can do in military roles. As the session concluded, Maya understood that her true legacy wasn't about one broken leg. It was about thousands of opened doors. As the session concluded, a senior cadet approached Maya with a request. Sergeant, would you consider being my mentor through our new professional development program? Your experience is exactly what I hope to learn from. The request touched Maya deeply. Mentorship represented a new dimension of her growing legacy, a chance to shape not just policies and protocols, but individual careers and perspectives. 3 years after the incident, Maya received an unexpected invitation. The Army was dedicating a new training facility focused on defensive tactics and appropriate use of force. They wanted her to speak at the opening ceremony. The facility would include a training room named in her honor. Standing at the podium on dedication day, Maya surveyed the audience. Among the familiar faces of colleagues and superiors, she spotted Marcus Bennett, now walking with only a slight limp and looking healthier than she had seen him since the incident. Beside him sat Colonel Harrison, now approaching retirement age, but still commanding respect with his presence. Even Captain Mitchell was there, demoted, but still serving after taking responsibility for his role in the incident. 3 years ago, I was just a soldier trying to do my job, Maya began. I never expected to be standing here today, never imagined having a training room named after me. But life rarely follows the paths we expect. She paused, making eye contact with various individuals in the audience. The incident that brought us all together was painful. For some, more literally than others. A gentle laugh rippled through the crowd as Marcus good-naturedly raised his hand. But from that pain came growth, personal and institutional. We learned that our training needed to evolve. We learned that our culture needed to change. Most importantly, we learned that progress often comes from our most challenging moments. After the ceremony, Marcus approached Maya with a woman she didn't recognize. "Maya, I'd like you to meet my fiancée, Dr. Rebecca Chen. She was my physical therapist during rehabilitation." Maya shook the woman's hand warmly. "It's a pleasure to meet you. I hope he's a better patient than he was an opponent." "He's come a long way," Dr. Chen replied with a smile, though he still complains when the exercises get tough. As the reception continued, Colonel Harrison joined their conversation. "Chen, Bennett, who would have thought we'd all be here together 3 years ago?" "Not me." "Sir," Marcus admitted, "I thought my life was over when they discharged me. And I never imagined I'd become the poster child for women in combat roles," Maya added. Harrison nodded thoughtfully. "That's the thing about defining moments. They reveal who we truly are and who we have the potential to become. You both rose to that challenge, albeit in different ways. And in that moment, Maya understood that the best endings are really just new beginnings. As the evening wound down, Maya found a quiet moment alone. She reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From a nervous private in a training competition to a respected sergeant whose experience had helped reshape military policy. The path had not been easy, nor had it been the one she would have chosen, but it had led her to a place where she could make a difference, where her voice mattered, and where her actions had meaning beyond herself. The incident on the training ground had lasted only seconds. The leg had healed, though Marcus would always walk with a limp. But the ripples of that moment continued to spread outward, touching countless lives and changing an institution that had existed for centuries. It was a legacy neither Maya nor Marcus had sought, but one they had both come to embrace. As she prepared to leave, Maya caught sight of her reflection in a window. The face that looked back at her was not just that of a soldier, but of someone who had become part of something larger than herself. A movement toward a military where skill and character mattered more than gender, where principles of respect and equality were not just spoken, but lived. Sergeant Maya Chen had proven that strength comes in many forms, and sometimes the most important battles are won not through aggression but through skill, composure, and the courage to stand up for yourself when someone tries to tear you down. She had broken a man's leg in self-defense, but in doing so, she had helped break down barriers that had stood for generations. And as she walked into the twilight, the silver compass Marcus had given her heavy in her pocket, Maya Chen knew that her journey was far from over. There would be new challenges, new battles, new opportunities to prove that a soldier's worth isn't measured by physical strength alone, but by the strength of their character, the sharpness of their mind, and the steadiness of their resolve. The training ground where it all began was empty now, silent in the gathering darkness. But if you listened carefully, you could almost hear the echoes of 500 voices, chanting a name that would be remembered long after everyone present that day had retired or moved on. Chen! 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 A woman who had simply defended herself had become a symbol of change. A man who had lost everything had found redemption through humility and growth, and together, their story had reminded an entire institution that progress isn't always comfortable, change isn't always easy, but both are always necessary. The sun set on Fort Liberty, casting long shadows across the training ground, just as it had 3 years earlier on a morning that changed everything. But this time, the shadows fell on a different military, a changing culture, and thousands of women and men who would never forget the day Maya Chen stood her ground and proved that courage comes in all sizes. 3 seconds of violence, 3 years of transformation, one legacy that would last forever. Maya Chen had come to Fort Liberty to be a soldier. She left as something more, a pioneer, a teacher, a symbol of what's possible when talent meets opportunity and courage meets challenge. And somewhere in a rehabilitation center, Marcus Bennett walked his daily laps, his limp a permanent reminder that the hardest lessons are often the ones that hurt the most and the most valuable. 2 soldiers. 1 moment. An entire military changed. This is how progress happens. 1 broken leg, 1 open mind, 1 courageous stand at a time. If this story moved you, hit subscribe with notifications on. And tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from, and have you ever had a moment that changed your entire life?